She asked me to cut off everyone from my past, and I did. That's the kind of man I was. When Claire said it, she made it sound like love, like we were building something clean, something untouched by old wounds. We had a deal. No exes, no gray areas, no leftovers from lives we'd lived before each other. And I held up my end without a single complaint. I ended a friendship with a woman I'd known since I was 14. We dated for 1 month in ninth grade. 1 month, ancient history by any measure. But I let that go, because Claire asked me to, because I thought that's what it meant to be serious about someone. 17 years later, I found out she never held up her end at all. It started with a conversation at work. Casual, offhand, the kind that changes everything without warning. My sister Diane's ex had recently joined my company. We'd run into each other a few times, nothing deep, nothing personal, but one afternoon he pulled me aside and told me why he and Diane broke up. Said he couldn't stay with someone who still spent time with a former FWB. Then he looked me straight in the eye and called me a bigger man for letting Claire stay close to hers. I didn't move. He kept talking. I stopped hearing him. Her FWB, Derek. The name landed in my chest before it reached my brain. I'd met him a dozen times over the years. Parties, dinners, group weekends. Claire had always introduced him as just a friend. Easy, relaxed, no hesitation in her voice. The guy who never married because he had a free soul. I'd always found that phrase mildly annoying.
If this kind of story holds your attention, you can subscribe to Duality. It doesn't unfold the way you expect.
The kind of thing people say when they're proud of not committing to anything. I never found it threatening. I'd asked Claire about him, twice, maybe 3 times early in our relationship. She always smiled, always said the same thing, just friends. And I believed her. I even went to Diane, my own sister, who told me Derek and Claire were like a brother and sister. Nothing more. I chose to believe her. That was my mistake, and I stopped looking. For the next week, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie there with the ceiling above me and run the math in my head, over and over until it felt like a bruise. Derek and I were both 6 feet tall, both blonde, both blue-eyed. Strangers had commented on it before, laughed about it even, and I'd laughed with them. Until that week, the thought had never gone anywhere dangerous. But now I couldn't stop it. My daughter was 16. My twin boys were 12. I loved them with everything I had. I had to know. I ordered the DNA test before I said a single word to Claire. I also called a lawyer. When I finally sat Claire down and told her what I knew, she went completely still. She didn't reach for an excuse. She didn't get angry or try to flip it. Her hands were in her lap. She looked at me the way people look when they know. Whatever comes next, they deserve. She made me cut off everyone from my past, and she never did the same. I drove her to her parents' house, a little over an hour. She cried for most of it, quietly, the kind of crying that sounds more like trying not to. I kept both hands on the wheel and said nothing. The GPS kept announcing exits. Neither of us acknowledged it. That should have been the end of it. I was ready for that to be the end. Divorce, DNA results, move forward. I had a lawyer, I had a plan. I had 17 years of trust sitting at the bottom of a hole I hadn't known was there, and then I went through her phones, her current phone first, then the old one, a model from over a decade ago, kept in a shoebox at the back of a shelf. I don't know why she'd kept it. Maybe she forgot it was there. Maybe some part of her always knew this day might come. I read for 3 hours without stopping. My sister Diane's name was everywhere. She had known from the beginning. Not just known, she had built the architecture of this. She was the one who first suggested the rule about cutting off exes. She had also been the one to tell Claire that Derek didn't count. 2 nights in Europe years ago, she'd said, casual, meaningless, before we were even official. And then, when Claire had tried to distance herself from Derek and that whole group, which she had tried, I could see it clearly in the messages. Diane stopped her every time. She told Claire that bringing it up would cause unnecessary stress, that it might affect her pregnancy, that the kindest thing was to say nothing and let it quietly fade on its own. It never faded, because Diane made sure it didn't. She had her own reasons, a crush on one of Derek's close friends, a group she didn't want to lose. So she kept engineering reasons for Claire to show up, lying about who would be there, wearing her down with guilt, reframing it every time Claire tried to pull back, page after page, year after year. I put the phone down on the kitchen table. I didn't pick it up again for a long time. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just her secret. My sister built it. The morning Ray drove 3 hours to sit with me, I still hadn't opened the DNA envelope. We had a beer. I told him everything. Not the edited version, all of it. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer opinions I hadn't asked for, didn't try to fix anything. He just stayed in the room with me, which was the only thing I actually needed. After a while, I picked up the envelope. I held it for longer than I should have. The paper felt heavier than it had any right to. All 3 kids, mine, and somehow, that didn't fix anything. I didn't feel what I expected to feel. There was no clean wave of relief. Something collapsed inside me instead, a weight that had been keeping me upright, suddenly gone. And underneath it, just exhaustion and grief and a guilt I hadn't earned but couldn't shake. I put my face in my hands. I stayed there. Ray didn't say a word. He didn't move. When I finally looked up, he told me something he'd never mentioned before. His parents had stayed together after one of them cheated, stayed for the kids, which is what people told each other was the right thing to do. He said it was the worst decision they ever made. Not for themselves, for him. He'd spent years wishing they had just been honest, just ended it, instead of asking everyone to live inside something fractured and pretending it was whole. I heard him. I really heard him. I told him I was going through with the divorce, and then I talked to Claire. She came back from her parents, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read those messages, and I asked her to explain it, not defend it, just explain it. She talked for a long time. Her first long relationship, she said, had ended because her boyfriend cheated on her with a mutual friend. 3 years, gone like that. She said she'd carried something from that into everything that came after. That when things got serious between us, she became terrified. Not of me specifically, but of the possibility. Of me having a woman from my past who still mattered. That's where the rule came from. Not control. Fear. She was scared. And she built rules around that fear. She told me she'd tried to say something once, early on. Diane had stopped her. Told her there was no point in causing pain over something that was already over. That telling me would only make things worse. Claire had believed her. And then the months became years. And the years became a door she couldn't figure out how to open. She showed me more messages, more evidence of Diane pulling strings, more moments where Claire had tried to back away and Diane had maneuvered her back in. Then I asked if she'd take a polygraph. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I don't put much stock in polygraphs. Anyone who's looked into them knows why. But she said yes. No pause, no hesitation. She made me cut off everyone from my past. And she should have told me the truth from the start, but the truth I found in those messages wasn't what I'd been bracing for. It wasn't a woman protecting a second life. It was a woman caught between an old fear and a person she trusted, my own sister, who had used that fear as leverage, quietly, for years. I called off the divorce, not because it made sense, because leaving would have been easier. We're in counseling now, separately and together. Claire has cut off that entire friend group without debate. Diane is blocked on every platform, through every channel. I walked Diane down the aisle at her wedding. She was the only family I had left after our mother died. I thought we understood each other in the way that surviving loss together makes you think you understand someone. I sit in the kitchen some mornings before anyone else wakes up. The house is quiet in a way that used to feel peaceful. My grandfather left me this place because he was the closest thing to a father I ever had. I used to ride my bike 30 minutes every Sunday just to sit across from him and play chess. The walls still hold something of him, something I can't name. I stayed in this house. I stayed in this marriage. Not because the hurt went away. I read every message, I looked her in the eye, and I made a choice. She made me cut off everyone from my past, and I'm still figuring out what that cost us both. I stayed, not because it was easy, because leaving would have been easier.
If you find yourself thinking about this later, you can subscribe for more stories like this.